that. You give me a second. I was just sort of like, you know, could not go to sleep, you know.
Last weekend I was in service.
Oh, you know when you're driving, Ready, Grace, going to make a few videos, Gracie. 30 days, Facebook jail, you know. Oh, I must admit, I do love his videos, you know. Yeah, he doesn't know what he wants, you know what I mean? But I have a bit of a giggle that he wastes so much time, you know, on us, you know what I mean? Especially you guys that are sort of out there doing stuff at the moment, you know.
You know, I love Gracie. The guy's a communist and he's profiting off our backs.
Yes.
We're not collecting anything from him. Not even a
Is that true about him urinating on somebody in the train or something?
You know, there's a few more instances there.
Yes,
yeah, I don't like to talk about that sort of thing because that's sort of below my pale, but
yes,
I like to stick to.
Like how can anyone defend Sudanese gangs or multiculturalism, all this immigration or the foreign seller? What drives these communists? What do they fucking want, you know?
Well,
complete desolation, you know?
Exactly, that's exactly what they want.
You know? Well, for this time it's going to be better, you know, we stuffed up in the Soviet Union and China, but it's going to be better this time, you know?
Yeah, it's going to be better this time because the IQ's lower.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, so they'll improve on some of the shit.
The collective IQ is
their ideology is opposite ours. Ours is about, you know, you grow up, you grow old, you grow wise, you evolve, you have a family, you pass down the information, you pass down the knowledge. Theirs is, you know, theirs is like, you know, it's yin and yang, male to female. Theirs is opposite because they want to have a different tradition.
That's why they're all on antidepressants and that, you know, these feminists and these lesbians and socialists, they're all crackpots, you know what I mean? Well, what they want, they're seeking perfectibility, but it's impossible. Because we live in an imperfect world, you know?
Their perfection is equality, two flat lines. Everybody is safe, a bunch of walking zombies. I mean, look around. Who says hello to anybody?
It's a crazy circular argument, this whole equality thing, isn't it, you know? I want equality. Well, I want equality too with Kerry Packer. I want equality, you know what I mean?
What shit are you talking?
You going, mate? How you going, Blair?
What if it's a camera, mate? You want to throw something in there?
Selfie?
You want to throw some shit in there? Shit on that. Say some shit.
Mate, I've been driving all night. Just here to support John. That's it.
What's been happening with the lads, mate?
It's going off. It's going too crazy, actually. Can't really keep track of the membership. Like, there's people that are popping up as members that I didn't even know were members everywhere. Which was kind of like the same as UPF, but...
Yes, not bad.
No?
Oh, okay,
Patrons,
Oh, no, that's Australia-wide.
You know what?
Nice.
Sorry, mate, how are you?
that cracked me up, but I'm ready.
But, you know, we've got to... can't say certain things. It's amazing the beautiful journey.
Is that your bag? The big one? We're still looking for a back, you know? It's out there, the security pass. No, it's bus, so it's
It'd be a good backdrop to have in there, you know.
Good shot across there with the wind on them.
There was one here.
Careful where you step.
You think you'll go into this? You know what I mean? They've got their agenda, they've got their interests.
It's just outrageous.
Sitting going around some of these streets now, what I share in common with these lunatics around here?
I love it. Take it over.
Last of the sodomites, the second other Muslims. Seriously.
We don't really need a loudspeaker, do we?
Oh, do you want to use it, mate, just for the, you know?
Brand new.
Okay, jolly good.
Got to break it in.
So the gay car, yeah. Yeah. Put it on, you know.
Give me water.
No, it's this one. The buttons in here. For that.
What am I doing?
Do you want to hold it, mate?
Yeah.
Here's the buttons. It's a separate button on the side.
So if I do nothing here, press this, we're fine. We're here. We're here in Sydney, in Lakemba, in Australia, for the first of the International Freedom of Speech Days. We're starting here at 12 noon, and there will be another in Melbourne, Australia at 1:30, and then there's a third in London. We started off here in Lakemba because this is where Lauren Southern, the international journalist, found out that there was a no-go zone. She was directed by an inspector of police not to even walk down one of the streets of Lakemba because of the reaction of people on the streets. She was told it was a very religious area and they would get upset and violent and a breach of the peace would occur if she went down there. That was Inspector Rick Aish, who told her that the local people walk around here without fear, but she could not. Nor do the little girls, the underage marriage girls of 12, 14 years old who are locked up in the back rooms in the streets of Lakemba before they will submit to their husbands, their overage husbands. I bet they're not very happy that Lauren Southern wasn't allowed to walk down the streets of Lakemba. What about the 11 Australian girls a week who are born here in Australia who will be clitorectomised, have their genitals mutilated? I bet those little girls that live in Lakemba are not very happy with that police inspector for stopping Lauren Southern for walking down the street. Here in Australia we believe in free speech. Here in Australia we don't respect things which deserve no respect. We feel free to ridicule those things which can be ridiculed. We feel free to criticise Islam. And what Lauren Southern did was prove that there is already a Muslim no-go zone here in Australia. I object to that. That's the purpose of today. That's the purpose of this gathering. I said I'd be here by myself. I'm glad I'm not. There's about 30 or 40 of us here, and it's going to be even bigger in Melbourne and even bigger in London. So thank you very much for coming here, and please feel free to say what you think. The only condition is no inciting of violence and no breaking Australian law. That's all for today. Thanks.
Thanks very much, John. It's great to be here. It's disappointing in the city of 5 million that we can't get thousands of people here because it's a very important message, freedom of speech. And to me, freedom of speech is just a simple definition. It's in the way that it's about being an individual. It's about being me and not having the state control everything that I do, or living in North Korea and being a zombie. So yeah, to me it's really important because it's the most important human right. And many of us here have been taken to the Human Rights Commission before. We've been taken to the Supreme Court by these sort of dogmatic communists that want to take freedom of speech. And really it's an attack on the only civilisation in modern history that brought around freedom of speech is the British Empire. You know, it wasn't perfect, but it brought us a lot of good things. And freedom of speech was one of them, and also democracy. But we look at democracy today, and it's been totally violated, bent over, and and buggerised. Which is very unfortunate. But that's the thing. Once a nation loses its identity with mass third world immigration, you start to lose freedom of speech, because when we brought in multiculturalism in 1973 and had bipartisan support, in 1975 we brought in the Racial Discrimination Act, and then in the mid-80s Hawke brought in the Human Rights Commission, and these are all directives from the United Nations where we've lost our sovereignty. And that's what they want. They want to destroy our sovereignty and take away our identity, our Australian identity. And in such a short period of time of 230 odd years, it's not perfect. We made mistakes. We created a great country that has been the envy all over the world. And that's why you go around here, and when I drove into to Wiley Park in Lakemba, I couldn't see any Australians because there's not many Australians living around here. This is a hotbed of radicalism, it's a hotbed of welfare abuse, criminality, and our government hides it. They've got the audacity to bloody well hide it and say it's not happening. And that happened in Victoria with the Sudanese gang when that Christine Nixon banned the Manstone's, big fat obese sister. She had the audacity to say that Sudanese and Somalis had the same level of criminality as Anglos in Australia. And there was a report that was produced, and Andrew Bolt brought it out, and it showed the reality of crime in Victoria, and that was 5 or 6 years ago. And it was so bloody bad that Kevin Andrews said, we've got to do something about this, and he stopped Sudanese immigration in 2007. He said it's not working out. And then we had Rudd come into power and fling open the gates again. But we have to remember that the person that brought in all these Sudanese and agreed to the United Nations request was Amanda Vanstone, childless, human rights lawyer. To me, I think she doesn't like Australia, because how could you flood Australia with people that have been fighting amongst themselves for a very long time in a tribal existence and say it's going to be different over there in Australia? Well, it's not. Our streets are not safe, whether it's Sydney, whether it's Melbourne, and the areas that you go, especially where there's Islamics or there's African refugees. You have to be careful. You have to be very careful. You couldn't walk around here, and if somebody knew that you were a patriot and you said certain things, look out, they're probably going to have a go at you. And many of us have been in that situation before, that we have been attacked just for holding our opinions. And that's what it's coming to. We're being attacked by our government, through the courts and Human Rights Commission. We're being attacked on the streets. Our kids are being targeted. It just goes on and on. There is no freedom of speech in Australia, and what little freedom of speech that we do have, that we do exercise, we've got to go out there in events like this, and I know that there's been a lot of disunity in the movement for the last, year or so, but if somebody has something on and you agree in that message, well, it's important to support it and put aside our differences. And, people, they make excuses for not turning up today. Well, I just call them fucking lazy, because, mate, imagine the diggers in the First and Second World War. Oh, shit, it's raining outside, it's really bad today. I'm just going to sit back and, in the shed and, call up, Sheila to come over and do a rub and tug. No, they were in the trenches, they were covered in mud, they had disease, their mates were dying like flies, but they believed, they had strong convictions, and they loved their country, and they were standing up for freedom. Well, I can go on, and I just wanted to say something too, that in the Middle East, what's going on. I love Trump. He's great on immigration, he's great on jobs, but when it comes to the Middle East, let's get out of the bloody Middle East. I'm sick and tired of Australian soldiers dying in the Middle East for somebody else's internationalist, globalist wars, so they come back, sitting on the streets, these veterans, with all sorts of stress-related diseases and so forth. That's not, if somebody tries to invade Australia, fair enough, I'm going to get off my ass and pick up a gun, and I'm going to fight to defend this nation. But we shouldn't be going overseas and fighting other people's wars. There's just so much wrong in this country at the moment, and we've got to remember that Labor, Liberal or Greens, it's a merry-go-round. People go, oh yeah, Liberal's better than Labor. It's like comparing two types of dog shit and saying that dog poo is better than that dog poo. Well, it might be, it might taste and smell as bad, but it's still dog shit. It's been 40 years of bloody treason. We've got to stop supporting them. And, whether it's Pauline, she's not perfect, it's Fraser Anning, there might be certain things that we disagree. But overall, these people love Australia more than the political establishment. And I've had my political journey many years ago, coming from a Christian conservative, and I'm very much more on the right side when it comes to culture. see myself as a nationalist, but very much when it comes to economic issues, left wing. So that's the thing. There's lots of people that see things very differently, but we are united on freedom of speech, and it is the most important human right. And how dare the Human Rights Commission say to us Australians that we don't have a right to exercise our freedom of speech. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. It's Soapbox Day. We did say anybody who wanted a minute or two. Lee, did you want to talk today?
I just want to say, yeah, I'll say thanks to you, mate. Thanks, John. I just want to say thanks to John Bolton. Can everyone give him a round of applause, please? It takes a lot of courage to do this. In a time and a society where you're denigrated for even having political views, which go against the state's current social political dogma, where you're threatened with social and financial asphyxiation for being involved in anything like this, when you have ratbag journalists whose mission in life is to ruin yours, you know. So it takes a lot of courage. He's an accomplished man, he's a passionate man. He doesn't have to do this. He could quite easily live comfortably and spend the rest of his days surfing and holidaying. But he engages in this because he cares about the country and he cares about our basic rights as Australians. So put your hands together for him again, please. Say a big thank you to him. Thank you, because I really respect this man.
John.
Thanks very much, guys. It is Soapbox Day. Anybody who wants their 1 minute of fame is welcome to come up here and speak and say anything. The only provision is that it is lawful and it doesn't incite violence. But if there's nobody, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming. This is a small start. I did say to Mitch that I'd be here by myself if I had to, and I would have been. I was a bit frightened this morning when I woke up. But I thought, well, you just got to get over that because you never know what sort of opposition's going to come. We've seen people being beaten up outside of the Milo Yiannopoulos concert. We've seen people being beaten up outside the Newtown bookshop. So those sorts of things are not outside of the ballpark when you come to this sort of event. I can see I've got another voluntary speaker, so I'll give her 1 minute of fame.
Okay, I have a little pet hate, which some people that know me know about this pet hate, and that's the universities. Yes. And how that they've actually indoctrinated our children. They've gone from universities to schools and now they're in preschool. Now I'm about to tell you a story that's true because it's my own son. Now my son, it sounds a bit boasting, I'll have to give you his mark, he got 434 in the HSC. He did science at Sydney University and he was going to transfer to vet science but decided not to. So he went to Queensland Uni and did his honours degree. He got first class honours. After his first class honours, he then started to do his master's degree in cardiovascular imagery. From there, he was working with doctors who convinced him he should be a doctor. Now, I'm sure a lot of you go to a doctor's and find a lot of them can't speak English and you wonder why they're all from overseas. Well, now, this story will tell you why they're all from overseas. So he went and sat the GAMSAT exam at Queensland University, which is your entrance exam into medicine. He was in the top 10%. Now, he got an invitation for an interview, which means that everything about you, all your marks, everything else has been accepted or you wouldn't get an invitation. In that invitation, one of the first things they said to him, what is your opinion on immigration? Yes, it is a medical interview, but politics is very important in universities these days. So he said, close the gates of immigration until our country can decide the population it can support. They jumped down his throat, they told him he was wrong, the economy needed immigration, and he said he wasn't an economist, but that it was just his opinion. Less than a week later, he was actually given a letter of rejection. Now, overseas doctors are not asked their political opinions, so the doctors pulled him aside and they said, right, you've got two chances. Go back and every political question answer it left wing. Our local MP at the time was Ian Sinclair. He wrote to them, we're country people, he wrote to them and said, why would a country boy be knocked back? Their answer was because Robert Kennedy was only an average grade student, hence I gave you his marks. So he went along again and he answered everything left wing. Dr. Robert Kennedy is now a doctor, but his marks never changed. When the AMA was told about this, they said they knew all about it and there was nothing they could do, but the universities are answerable to nobody. That's why you've got a lot of overseas doctors. Our kids or our own kids are knocked back.
Thank you very much, and don't forget, we can't see any lefties here, but sometimes they do follow people as they leave, so just walk away in pairs and threes. Thanks. See ya.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Fucking
It is fun.
Yeah, good mate. Yeah, so what's been happening?
Oh, Renee.
not to say, but Pastor Keith has been asking about it.
Oh, okay,
He actually wants to know.
I saw your message, but I couldn't reply because it couldn't be here.
Oh, me too. I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
You know, I said it's Indonesian. So I said all Muslims should just get called on it. And they gave me a 30-day ban for that. You know, for 2 days. Another ban.
I feel being bad. First on the sodomite, second on the month. Let's go.
Interesting use of a fishing line.
It's because I got
intelligence, you know.
I got the Tommy first one first of all, and I thought, well, I'll get the others. It's just made up to fit on the van. Well, I might as well, because I've tried it in the test run, put that one up as well. Just so that's better, you know, it's not about high levels of education, it's all about dumbing down.
Renee got lost.
You know, a populace of retards.
He explained that. Yeah, and he said it was a deliberate plan.
Absolutely.
In 1983 he said that. Of ideological subversion of a nation. And starting off in the educational institutions and then working their way through everywhere else.
Aldous Huxley's, you know, Brave New World. Yes. Right. Brilliant book, you know. And it's just like, wow, it's just a cross between 1984, it's just, and you know, Brave
All
New
happening
World.
right before your eyes.
Yeah. You know, just reckless, sort of, you know, root everybody, get on the prescription tablets. Consume, you know, bring insurance. It's bizarre. It's like, you know, straight out of the pages of, you know, it's just so wrong. Take it as it is. And we've become there's no God, there's no morals, so you can do what you want. Yeah. You want to go and fucking
You want solid standard, it's always right.
You know, if I find somebody who's not nothing believing that, that's fair enough. An atheist, do you believe in nothing? Like agnostic, I can understand you there's some sort of supreme being, you don't want to believe in Christian God or Hindu God or whatever. One of the worries, but
positive things.
to me, it's
No violence. Which is what I've always said to the police every time I write. If we left alone, there's never any violence.
No, never.
In the words of one
We're all
of the
pretty well behaved.
These are all apparently extremely violent.
Renee
A lot of them don't.
yeah. John, we should get a picture of all of us together, just so we can, because it's always, you know, because we've got 30 or 40. Yeah.
You arrange it, mate.
Okay. Yeah. Just wait because Claire's talking and Reno.
Yeah.
John Bolton. He's doing a real solid representing me. I wouldn't actually take him on that to the High Court. And so I respect the man a lot, and I'm just doing
So tell me about the new project you're involved in. What is the Lads Society?
Lads Society. Well, I'm just a member. So I go to use the gym there down in Melbourne.